Hello, my crafty friends. It's Michelle, the Southern Shell. And can you believe it's August 1st already? And that means it's the first of the month collab with Hello Fall. And let's jump in with project number one. The first project I have here is I have some of these little canvas bags. They're thin, they're cotton. I know they would shrink up if I washed them. I didn't want to wash them. I want them to be able to breathe. I have some ink, some stamps, some beads. I did not use my gel pens at all, but I wanted to have them available just in case I wanted to try them on this project here. I have this piece of card left over from a ribbon that was wrapped around it. And I am going to use this stamp I have here. It's a generic stamp I've had for a while. And I'm going to go ahead and ink this up with some of my orchard ivy? Cottage ivy. Oh my goodness. So I went ahead and I just made sure I had a bunch on there. I thought I would use my stamping block to start with. And it did not give me a good full press, but I went ahead and started that way because, you know, as a stamper on paper, I've always used blocks or stamp positioners. I stamped a little bit in the past on fabric, but not a lot, and it did not come out quite in that centerpiece. And so what I did is I took the stamp off, I lined it back up, and then I used my fingers to press in that area that the ink didn't come off, and that turned out fine. So I just decided it'd probably be easier to stamp that way instead of trying to use the stamp block. I did use the stamp block to ink up my stamp, and it just pulled it off from there and laid it onto my fabric bag, and that turned out just fine. So I'm going to do stamps on 4 different bags, and I'm going to use the terracotta, and I'm going to use this cottage ivory. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take those wood beads into a little container here. I put 15 wood beads in there. I thought that would be enough for these bags, but the bags were still pretty big. So I did end up adding table scatter round balls, foam balls to this, and did the same process. But first thing I did was add the beads, and then I added some Mod Podge first, some matte Mod Podge, and then I shook that up real well all around to get those beads coated with that Mod Podge. And then I came in with my pumpkin pie spice, added it to those Mod Podge beads, shook them up really well, making sure they were all covered and ready to go. Now, while those were drying, you see them drying in the top corner there, I went ahead and got out my rich cocoa and this really cute mug stamp here. I'm going to do the same process where I stick the sack onto that piece of card. I pulled out this really cute little mug stamp that I have here, and I went ahead and inked it up with that cottage ivy. When I went ahead and stamped that onto both sides of my sack, I went ahead and came in with some love letter and mementos and inked up a little saying to go in the middle of each one of those mugs. And it just says, "Hello, sweet friend." And I just thought that was perfect for if you're going to make any of these little scent sashes to give away to friends or hostess. If you're going to anybody's house for any holiday parties this year, you can do these in fall scents, you know, like with your cinnamon or your pumpkin spice or anything like that. I'm doing 2 in my fall pumpkin spice, and I'm doing 2 in a peppermint mocha so that I can have 4 of these little sashes. I went ahead and got out my beads and my table scatter and my Mod Podge. Now, the jars that I have in my upper right hand corner are used coffee grounds and cocoa. So I'm adding my Mod Podge in here, and then I'm taking some mint oil. And once that oil gets added in there with the Mod Podge, I went ahead and closed the sack and just worked that glue and mint oil all the way around those beads. I added some coffee grounds and now I'm adding some cocoa powder. Oh my goodness, guys, my house smelled so good after this. So I went ahead and added that in there and then moved them around in that bag, making sure each one of those beads and table scatter were covered in those coffee grounds and that cocoa powder, along with that mint scented Mod Podge. Once they were done and coated, I had to dump them out so that they could dry before I put them in the bags. I didn't want that glue to be wet in those bags and actually glue to the sides and pull off any of that cocoa powder, that cocoa and coffee powder, I should say. Oh, it smells so good. So we're going to set those aside and let them dry a little bit. And when they're dry, we're going to come back in and fill our bags. Now, I just took it and I separated the, first I did the table scatter and then I added the beads. And I'm going to tie those little sacks up at the top. They look like, these would make cute little Santa sacks too. But I wanted to make these little scent sashes here. And I cut off the remaining after I knotted it up. And then I'm going to come in with some of my green jute twine. I just thought that would help accent those colors. You see the two off to the side there. Those are the pumpkin spice ones. These are the peppermint mocha ones. Super cute. I'm just going to come in and I tied a bow around those with that green twine. And I'm coming back in with some different colored berries. Now, these, usually are red for Christmas and so forth. But I thought I would pull some of these green and white ones in for the fall because that's when they're starting to change colors and they're not going to be quite red yet in the middle of fall. And so I just thought, let's add some of the ones that are not quite ripe looking to our fall ones. And I've got some coffee cups stamped there. And I've got my girl with her coffee mug there. And we're just adding those beads to the front of these bags. Once I get those all on there, I'm going to take a couple of those beads and I'm going to cut them in half so I can place right on the front of these bags. And I think they turned out super cute, really easy to do, a little messy, but they turned out cute. Now I can take them any place I go, to somebody's house over the holiday seasons, and I can give them as little hostess gifts. So guys, this is the first of the month collaboration. This month's theme is Hello Fall since it's August. I'd like to thank our host, Brenda with Rustic and Lace DIY and Krista with Krista's Crafty Life. The links to their channel will be listed in the description box below, along with the playlist of all the wonderful crafters that are participating in this month's Hello Fall. And on to project number 2. I love the way this one turned out. So the items I used the sandstone by Waverly Chalk. I used that hanging shelf from Dollar Tree. I did not use those little wood rounds. I thought I might need them. I did use some of those little scatter balls, and I used some old ribbon tube containers and some rope, some very thin rope, thicker than twine. First thing I did was remove the edges off of my ribbon rolls so I could use those tubes. I did come in with my fingernail file and clean it up. I have this paper pad that I've had for several years here, probably at least 3, that I had gotten at Michael's. Yeah, this is a Michael's. And I made cards out of it several years ago. But I found some papers here that I really liked. I used my matte Mod Podge and I went ahead and loaded the inside of my tube with the Mod Podge, spread it nicely with my paintbrush, and then I'm going to roll up that little piece of paper right there and lay it inside that tube. I'm going to use my fingers to smooth it out as it pushes up against the inside edge of this tube. And then I'm going to come back in with my Mod Podge and go right on over that, make sure it's pressed up against the edge of the inside perfectly. Now for the outside, I'm going to do very much the same way. The outside I cut at 3 1/4 inches. I think it was like 3.5, so I could have a 1/4 inch on each side. Guys, I needed more. A 1/4 inch on each side was not enough to fold it down neatly. So with the second one, I'll show you what I did there. The first one I cut down to, it was 2.5 inches, and it fit perfectly on the inside of that tube. And then I glued the outside together on that one and then snipped it and tried to fold it on over and in. And this is when I found out it just was not quite long enough to fold down neatly. So with the second one, what I did is I lined it up even on the bottom and then went ahead and glued it all the way around, giving me a longer part on the top that I could fold down and create that edge to go over. Still not pleased with this. It is harder to do with your thick scrapbooking cardstock, and that's what this is. It'd been a lot easier with paper, but I really loved this card. So I went ahead and just worked with it. I made it nice and pliable with my Mod Podge, snipping about every 1/2 inch and then folding it down, rubbing it with my fingers and adding more Mod Podge as I needed. You see me pushing it down and just pressing that all the way down and around the inside of that tube. So as those tubes were drying, I came back in and I had painted one side with that dusk chalk paint, and I'm coming back in on the opposite side and putting my Mod Podge down. I now am going to lay that green paper with the little plaid pattern on it on the top of this. It wasn't wide enough, so I did cut it in half, and then I just pieced it together as best I could so that it would still look like one full piece. I did cut it long enough that I could have the edges go down over the sides of this, and that worked out just fine. Now here you see me just adding the Mod Podge to the other part of that, and I'm going to overlap this enough where I can get a good seal on both of those pieces to make it look more like one strip. Oh my goodness. So it was straight when I laid it down, but then I moved it and it was off. The lines were off just a little bit, but that's okay. It's handmade, right? So now I have these little wooden spools here that I'm going to use as feet to this. It's easier for me to pick it up if I had little feet on the bottom of it. And as I'm doing this, I'm checking around the edges and I'm making sure that all that Mod Podge is holding those pieces down. I'm using my Titebond wood glue to add these wooden spools to the bottom, to the wood, and that is going to hold them permanently and perfectly. I just love it. I added them to where the holes were originally to hang that shelf, and then 2 in the center there. And now I'm creating my tic-tac-toe board. I did cover this whole top with Mod Podge to make sure that it was going to be sealed. And I am adding the rope as my tic-tac-toe guide. And I'm just using my little white pen here to mark the center out, thinking, oh, I need to add that first line to the center. And no, that's not where you need to add your first line. You want the edges, you only have 4 cross lines, not 1 down the center. So you need your center to be open. So I just took that rope and I started with hot glue here, guys, and I'm going to show you that I put this down with hot glue because it's faster. However, hot glue and this rope on top of a Mod Podged surface did not work, okay? And I use Gorilla Glue sticks and I use a hot glue gun, not a low temp. And this rope lifted right back off. So off camera, I did use my wood glue to add these back down later, but I'm going to show you just how I did this pattern here, which was super easy. I just cut each strip to the length or the width of the board for the outside edges, and then the inside next to the edges, and then the inside pieces were cut a little shorter. And then I had to cut each individual square piece. If you watch, you'll understand. I just measured it out on the inside to match. Now I'm coming in with that same paint and going around my feet Simple, easy, don't need, I mean, it's not something you needed to see. Sorry, I kept that in there. But on a serious note, let's flip it over, and I went ahead and used my bling. I wanted a different color on the top of each one of my little cups there. You see, I used some of my flat jute braid to decorate the bottom of that after I glued it onto the top of my game board. And then I used my wood glue and my hot glue to add these beads to it, the little gem bling. They're not really beads, but I added that to the top to just give a little bit more color, because I'm always a little more, and it just looked too plain for me. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to overdo it, because that just, I don't want to make it too busy, but I want it to be cute, and that way it would, stand out a little bit. So I added some green to one side and the yellow to the other. Now I'm taking I had some not popsicle sticks, oh my gosh, chenille sticks or pipe cleaners that I'm trimming off the fuzz, because I'm going to take a couple of those little is it wicker balls? Probably. And I'm going to squish them down and make them into little pumpkins. And I tried it with the pipe cleaner, the chenille stem on there, with the fuzz still on there, and it just looked really bad. It was just too big. So I'm like, I'm going to trim off as much of the fuzz as I can, and then I'm going to wrap it and make it into a little pumpkin stem. Here you see me squishing those little balls down to make them a little flat on the bottom, a little flat on the top, so I can come in with that little trimmed off chenille stem, twist it around, and make a stem for the top of this cute little pumpkin that I'm going to actually glue onto my game board. So now that I've got it on there, I'm going to take my little paintbrush here, and I'm going to create a little swirly, and there we have pumpkin number 1. So I'm doing one in white and one in green. I have some moss here that I'm going to separate and glue on down to my board. There's my green one, and I'm going to use my wood glue again because I found out the hot glue wasn't sticking. So I'm going to take some wood glue, and I'm going to add this moss to the top of my boards, and I'm going to add the wood glue to the bottom of my pumpkin and stick it right on in there and let it dry. I'm going to do the same thing to the white side. After I just needed a little bit more moss there. Get that all stuck down, and then do the same thing for the white pumpkin on the other side. Just some wood glue down, tap that moss right into place. And this is moss that I recycled off of a strawberry plant that I had created earlier this year. And so it has some floral foam glued to it, but that's fine. I reuse it. I glued my pumpkin right on in there, and then I'm adding a little sprig of that moss to the top of my white pumpkin to give it a little bit more. Adding those balls to my cups, and now I have a tic-tac-toe board. How cute! I really think this turned out cute. It has, the moss. It gives a little bit more bling bling for me, but it turned out adorable. On to project number 3. Are you ready for this one? Here's what we need. So I have those cutting boards. They are 3.5 inches by 2.5 inches. I have my recipes that I got off of creativefabrica.com, my Dusk Waverly chalk paint, and my Mod Podge. First thing I'm doing is putting a coat on both sides of my cutting board of my Dusk chalk paint. I wanted to make sure those laser cut edges were still being shown, so I was very careful. I did cut out each of my recipes because I wanted to make sure that they were fitting on my cutting boards nicely. I did come in with some terracotta Mementos ink, and I went ahead and distressed the edges of those recipes with that terracotta. It makes it look like there's cinnamon or pumpkin spice on the edges of your recipes. I came in with my Mod Podge, and I put a nice coat on top of here because my mulberry paper, my rice paper, what I create my decoupage images on, I went ahead and they need a little bit more glue than a tissue paper. So I went ahead and added a nice coat on top of my cutting boards. I went ahead and centered as best I could because each of these are cut out a little different. Every recipe is a little, the size is different because they require more items. Once I did that, I went ahead and attached each one of my recipes to one cutting board. When I got all those on there, I did come back in and do another coat of Mod Podge over the top of these. And then I came back in with my ink and I distressed the edges. Actually, I distressed the edges first and then came back in with a coat of Mod Podge. You see my cutting board now looks like it's just a little bit messy, like I've been working on that with these recipes, and I just think they're super cute. So once again, once they're all colored around the edges, make it look like a little bit dirty, I came back in with my Mod Podge and sealed the tops of these cutting boards. Now, I should have done a thin coat, and I didn't, and it did smear my images just a little bit, but I think it still turned out fine. I'm not going to worry about that. I went ahead and went through some charms, and I picked out 3 charms, and I have that twine there, that rope. Is it twice? I don't remember what they call it. I want to call it twizel, but I think that's my made-up word. And I went ahead and have some magnets here. I had a roll of magnets, and it had been in a roll for so long I had to be careful warming it up enough to straighten it out to go on the back of these cutting boards. So I used my wood glue once again because I knew that the hot glue might not hold on there very well. So I used the wood glue first, and then I went ahead and taped it down. What I ended up doing with the rest of these is I did the wood glue in the center, a dab of hot glue on each end, and then I laid it down. That hot glue grabbed and held it long enough for that wood glue to set. That worked out perfect. This was a pain in the tail. So this is where I learned that, okay, I'm going to need a dab of hot glue because the curve of that magnet was rough. So now I have my charms here. I went ahead and I'm pulling in some embroidery floss so it's thinner. I needed to put 2 knots in the bottom of this embroidery floss. I used some green and I used some red. And what I'm doing here is I add 2 knots to the bottom of that, and then string those crosses right on in that onto that embroidery floss. The knot will hold that cross right on in place. I go up just about a quarter to a half inch above that first cross I added on there, did another double knot, added the second cross on so that those crosses now are staggered on that piece of embroidery floss. I have my red one here, and I'm doing a triple knot because this particular one had a bigger hole, the little love tassel charm here, and I'm just adding that and only 1 charm to that one. So I have 3 charms on each one of these cutting boards. I went ahead and took my twine here and thread it through the cutting board ring and tied a knot to the top of it. Once that was done, I took another little piece of that same twine and wrapped it around the handle and tied a knot. I wanted to add a quick little picture here of what I actually used. It is sisal twine from Walmart, and it's just under $5. Once that was done, I tied a knot in my embroidery floss, linking those 2 strands together with the charms on it, laid it across the sisal twine, and then tied a knot to hold it in place. I used my wood glue once again to hold that together after I wrapped the embroidery floss around that twine. Now I'm just coming in and I'm untwisting the ends of that sisal that were loose because I want it to be frayed and open, to be very farmhouse looking, and I think it turned out adorable. Tell me what you think, guys. Which was your favorite? All right, y'all, here you have it. Here are the projects I made for this first of the month collaboration. we're doing all about fall right now, and so I have, of course, these beautiful fall colors on this tic-tac-toe board I made. That'll be super cute on my coffee table. And then we have over here the cutting boards with the recipes on them that are now magnets. And of course the scented sashes that I made as well. We have the peppermint mocha and the pumpkin pie spice. So guys, thank you so much for spending time with me. I know how precious time can be, and for you to take time out of your day to watch my videos just means the world to me. If you like this type of content, please give me a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed, I hope you will do so. But now, consider doing so now by hitting that subscribe button. Hit that bell notification, and YouTube should notify you when I've uploaded a new video. As always, guys, stay safe. God bless, and bye for now.